Chapter 101. But since Reo had already used the cat's claw, there was no reason to take it back in vain. He raised his right hand and instantly accelerated, piercing through skin and bone, and tearing out the man's heart. Plop. Thump. A bright red heart beat in Reo's hand. He had to admit, the feeling of holding someone else's heart was strangely wonderful. It was as if he held their very life in his palm. Oh. That's the Zoldyck assassination technique. Burra, watching Reo rip the heart from the unlucky bastard, shouted excitedly. Although he had served as the examiner for the second phase of the Hunter exam, he'd never seen Killua use this move. He had only heard Leorio mention it once during a tea party. Seeing it now with his own eyes was exhilarating. The unfortunate victim, now feeling the emptiness in his chest and watching Reo hold his beating heart, which was now slowing, reached out to him in desperation. Please. Please. Give it back. Please. Reo looked at him, the corners of his mouth lifting into a smirk. With a squeeze of his right hand, the heart burst between his fingers. Snap. The man stared in horror as his heart exploded in Reo's grasp, then slumped to the ground in despair, relinquishing control of his body. Snap. Moments later, blood began to pool beneath him. Elsewhere, Reo looked at his blood-soaked right hand with disgust. The move had been undeniably cool, but now his hand was dripping in blood. If he had known it would be this messy, he wouldn't have used it. He used his nen to form a pitch-black arm from his left shoulder, pulled a water bottle from his void storage, opened it with his right hand, and poured the clean water over his bloody hand via the nen-formed limb. Once his hand was clean, Reo felt significantly more comfortable. Casually tossing the bottle aside, Reo turned his gaze to Menki, who had been silent this whole time. From the few words uttered by the now dead man, the truth was beginning to emerge. Among the elder guards, or possibly higher authorities, there were those targeting people with nen abilities. And Bella had actually informed those higher-ups that Menki was a nen user. That struck Reo as odd. Because from every angle, Menki didn't seem like a seasoned nen practitioner. Reo stood quietly, studying her, as if trying to glean something more. After a long pause, he finally spoke, surprised. Menki, Bella doesn't have the ability to see auras. So I think she assumed you were just like her, a fellow nen user. Menki didn't reply right away, but the increasing redness of her face made it clear she was holding back some irritation. Reo realized he probably hit a nerve again, so he prepared to change the topic and move on. But before he could speak, Menki cut in. That's right. That idiot's never awakened nen, so he doesn't know what my ability is. But to assume mine's the same as my mother's? That's just ridiculous. Reo realized this was all a massive misunderstanding. But now that it had happened, and considering the elder guards dared attack Menki, things couldn't be settled peacefully anymore. Besides, Reo thought about the new ability he'd obtained today and couldn't help but lick the corner of his lips. Killing truly was a shortcut to rapid growth. Since arriving on Meteor City, he'd picked up 3 impressive abilities. If enemies were going to keep coming, offering themselves up, who was he to turn them away? Still, what you said earlier, the mission target is linked to the elders. What exactly is going on? Reo was curious. Menki had mentioned the mission was connected to the elders, and they hadn't even started the submission yet, but they were already at odds with them. Menki considered his question. Now that their team had been assembled and their conflict with the elders was inevitable, she explained it to Reo. Our mission target this time is the St. Gamboa Lotus. As far as my investigation goes, it only exists in Meteor City. She paused, then began explaining the reason behind its exclusivity. It's a plant that can only grow in extremely polluted environments. While it purifies its surroundings, it actually does so by absorbing all the radiation and toxins in the area to sustain itself. Reo nodded, finally understanding why such a plant could only exist in a place like Meteor City. It's also highly territorial. Only one St. Gamboa lotus can exist in any given zone. There are 12 zones in Meteor City. Each pair of zones shares a single St. Gamboa lotus. So the zones with adjacent numbers tend to have closer ties. The 11th and 12th zones share one such lotus. When Reo heard this, his brows furrowed. If Menki was right, then to obtain the lotus, they'd have to contend with elders from 2 zones. But her next words caught his attention. However, the St. Gamboa lotus regenerates only once every 3 years. Each time, it produces a few lotus seeds, then withers. It won't bloom again until the next cycle. And this is that 3rd year. If I'm right, the bloom is happening any day now. The real objective of our mission is those lotus seeds. Even securing just one means the mission is a success, and you, Reo, will have passed your hunter exam. Her next words made Rio's eyes shine with interest. Of course, if you manage to retrieve more than 1 seed, I'll personally recommend you to the guild president for promotion to a 1-star gourmet hunter. With that title, your rights within the association will increase, and several of the association's more exclusive facilities will become available to you. Reo didn't particularly care about the star ranking, but still, having some clout among a crowd of hunters sounded pretty appealing. Chapter 102. After listening to Menki's explanation, Reo understood the difficulty of the mission. But surprisingly, it didn't seem as daunting as he'd initially thought. The St. Gamboa lotus produces seeds every 3 years, so while rare, it wasn't impossibly scarce. With that in mind, Reo began forming a plan. But for now, he continued listening to Menki outline the mission details. Next, we need to locate the St. Gamboa lotus in the 11th and 12th districts and determine its precise seed production timing. No sooner had Menki finished her sentence than Boara, who stood near the door, visibly tensed. At the same moment, Reo unleashed a surge of pitch-black nen from his left arm, shielding both himself and Menki. Boom! An attack struck the small building they were in. Atop a garbage mound in the 11th district, a tall woman waved her right hand, and the sniper rifle beneath her vanished. She had fired the explosive shot. Boom! A deafening explosion rocked the neighborhood. A kilometer away, terrified residents screamed, believing another violent incident was underway. Og, cough. As the smoke cleared, Reo coughed, choking on the debris-filled air. The room they'd been in was blown apart. Just before the impact hit, Reo had managed to form a nen shield with his left arm and crashed through a wall with Menki in tow, narrowly escaping the full brunt of the blast. Boara, unfortunately, had been a bit farther away, too far to save in time. Reo didn't know his condition but could only pray he was still alive. Swoosh! A figure dropped from the sky, its body expanding unnaturally as it descended. Reo immediately focused his nen-infused eyes upward. His pupils dilated. A humanoid nen beast. Judging by the sheer pressure emanating from it, it possessed at least 2 doors worth of aura. Reo. Run. Take Menki and go. Reo was just about to dash to the left when he heard Boara's faint voice calling out from the rubble. Damn it. Whoever had launched these attacks had terrifying power, and even more terrifying stealth. Reo and the others hadn't detected a thing until it was too late. Still, he couldn't just abandon Boara. Run, damn it, Reo shouted, hoping Boara could move on his own. There was no more time to think. Reo slammed his foot against the ground and launched himself toward the voice, hoping to reach Boara before another attack dropped from above. Mother's love. Boom. Rumble. Reo reached Boara just before another explosion erupted. The nen from his left arm surged, enveloping the 3 of them in a protective cocoon. For additional safety, he summoned another layer of defense. The impact was so massive that residents in both the 11th and 2nd districts felt the tremors. A massive crater formed beneath Reo's feet. Crack. The invisible shield shattered in midair. Menki, unconscious in Reo's right arm, hung limp. Though shielded, Reo felt a searing heat flood through his aura. It was residual heat from the explosion, not as destructive as the initial blast, but still dangerously harmful over time. To get a sense of how many enemies were around, Reo activated the N technique he had learned that day. A dome of dark Nen extended out, reaching a radius of 100 meters. Because Rio's aura reserves were down to half, he limited the range to conserve energy. 3 on the left. 12 on the right. 3 in front. 7 behind. He was surrounded, and stuck in a dire situation. On one side were his unconscious allies, on the other, a dozen enemies closing in. Damn it. Gritting his teeth, Reo reached out with his left hand and directed his final healing technique toward the seriously injured Buara. Hope for the dying. A pitch-black light shot into Buara. Reo poured in Nen from Menki's aura reserves. The healing speed matched previous times, but Buara's injuries were severe. It would take over a minute to stabilize him. With that done, Reo turned to flee. If he stayed, he'd burn through all his aura and die here. The left side only had 3 enemies, so he chose that route. Nen gathered beneath his feet, and with a light step, he sprinted forward. After running nearly 100 meters, he spotted 3 figures in white robes, 2 men and 1 woman. The 2 men were polar opposites, one tall and lanky, the other short and muscular, but shared eerily identical faces. The woman had a cold expression. A scar ran from her eye socket downward, ruining what would have been a beautiful face, but lending her an intense, savage presence. "There's the target," the scarred woman said, glaring at Reo. "Elder Guard, huh?" Reo muttered, recognizing the white robes. It was their signature attire. Then die. With a shout, Reo channeled Nen into his left arm, enveloping himself in an aura cloak. A long blade appeared out of thin air in his right hand, brimming with dense aura. Swoosh! The fierce woman whipped her arm downward. A dagger manifested in her hand. She accelerated forward, matching Rio's speed. Her dagger glowed with Nen, then stretched and reshaped into a makeshift longsword. The gap between them closed in seconds. Ding! Their weapons collided with a sharp metallic ring. An invisible shockwave burst out from beneath their feet. Their auras clashed, erupting in a burst of wind. The white-robed woman's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected Rio's strength to match hers. Determined to overpower him, she poured more strength into her dagger, attempting to force him back. But Rio's right arm surged with power, matching her push. Her efforts had no effect. If anything, they only fired up Rio's wild fighting spirit. And so, he pressed harder. Chapter 103. The fierce white-robed woman sensed the mounting pressure, but the corners of her mouth curled into a calm, confident smile. Reo instinctively felt something was off and prepared to retreat, but before he could leap back, he was pulled forward instead. At that exact moment, a dagger lunged toward his chest. She had tricked him. During their earlier weapon clash, she'd extended her Nen into her dagger to meet Rio's blade. But mid-clash, she had dispersed the Nen extension, causing Rio's blade to slice through nothing, throwing off his balance and sending him stumbling forward. The woman seized the opening and drove her dagger toward Rio's chest. But Reo didn't flinch. Her dagger struck him square in the chest, but instead of piercing flesh, it rang out with a metallic clang. The shock froze her momentarily, but in battle, a moment was all it took. Boom! Reo seized the opportunity, gripping the hilt of his blade and swinging it hard. Clang! The woman's dagger snapped in half under the impact, and the sword's momentum carried through, slashing toward her chest. HxH. The blade sliced through flesh. Reo frowned. He hadn't landed a fatal blow. But when he saw her severed arm spinning into the air, that frustration melted away. Maybe it had been wishful thinking to end this so quickly. The earlier strike to Rio's chest had been blocked by the protective plate he wore beneath his clothes. After realizing this woman's intent, he channeled a hefty amount of Nen into the plate. Ever since arriving on Meteor City, Reo had worn the chest guard without fail, to prevent surprise attacks like this one. Meanwhile, the woman, now revealed to be Erica, had managed to narrowly dodge the fatal blow by pivoting at the last second. She avoided being bisected, but at the cost of her right arm. Clutching the cleanly severed stump with her left hand, she tried to stop the bleeding, only to realize it was futile. She gave up and blocked the wound with Nen, sealing it shut. Reo couldn't help but admire her tenacity. The women of Meteor City were on another level. Having lost his own arm to Hisoka, Reo had spent a lot of time researching reattachment techniques. He knew that fully sealing a wound with Nen made future reattachment nearly impossible. That's why he sighed. Lady Erica. The short white-robed man nearby gasped in alarm. The battle had lasted only seconds, yet one of the top 5 in their team, Erica, had already lost an arm. Even the tall, thin man beside him looked shaken. Both men had been assigned to support Erica, aware of her formidable strength. They hadn't expected her to be injured so swiftly. "Shut it!" Erica barked. "Doyle, if you've got time to scream, start buffing me already." Doyle immediately closed his eyes and began chanting. Retreating to about 10 meters from Reo, Erica shouted without looking back, "And you, Locke, use your ability too." As she spoke, Erica reached into her pocket with her left hand and pulled out another dagger. She charged Reo again, this time even faster. Reo raised his blade, watching Doyle intently. Since Doyle began chanting, Erica's speed had noticeably increased. The pieces were coming together. He continued fending off Erica's strikes, exchanging slashes as her pace intensified. Unlike before, Erica didn't reinforce her weapon with Nen, she fought with a regular dagger this time, striking directly against Rio's blade. Buzz. Suddenly, Reo felt a strange heaviness in his body. His movements slowed, his steps lost sharpness. Erica's eyes gleamed, and she slashed toward Rio's throat. But she underestimated him. Even with the gravity shift, Reo adjusted instantly, retreating gracefully. His lips moved. "TCH." Erica clicked her tongue in annoyance, seeing her advantage dissolve. But inwardly, her smile grew. If Locke's ability was that simple, she wouldn't have brought both brothers with her. Yes, those two men were brothers. The short, white-robed one, Doyle, had gained the ability to increase the speed of others, desiring a fast-moving body. The tall, thin brother, Locke, had been fast from a young age and developed the ability to slow others down. It was ironic, really, opposing abilities born from opposing physiques. But none of that mattered to Reo right now. What he needed was to end Erica, quickly, and break through this encirclement. He hadn't forgotten, enemies still surrounded him, and he'd already spent 10 seconds fighting her. From his end field, he could feel others rapidly approaching. Rio's feet tapped lightly on the ground, and in a burst, he shot toward Erica. Aura swirled protectively around him. He swung his long blade in a wide arc, an obvious move. But Erica didn't know that. She instinctively blocked with her dagger. Clang! Sparks flew, and Erica was forced to ground herself to absorb the impact. Before she could even process the force, Rio's right leg bent, his left foot anchored him, and then, with a twisting motion from the waist, he drove his right knee upward. The full force of his body funneled into the strike and slammed into Erica's side. Before developing Nen abilities, Reo had relied solely on physical martial arts. Even though his left arm was gone and he could no longer box properly, his legwork remained sharp and lethal. In ordinary combat, he used blades for quick kills, but right now, his knee was the perfect weapon. Chapter 104. Erica's body began to tremble violently from the impact to her abdomen, the shockwave rippling through her entire frame in an instant. Thud. Rio's punch landed squarely in Erica's gut, producing a heavy, dull sound. Gah! A mouthful of blood surged up Erica's throat, but before she could even swallow it, Rio's next attack followed. Seeing Erica faltering, Reo wasn't about to let the opportunity slip. The long blade in his right hand gleamed as he swung it in a clean arc toward her. Swoosh! Erica's eyes widened, but she didn't panic. With one leg bent, she brought her shin up to block the slash. She knew she couldn't dodge in time. This was a gamble to survive, even if it cost her something. Crack! Her right leg was severed instantly by Reo's blade and flew through the air. Reo could clearly see the twitching muscles in the detached limb as it hit the ground. HxH. Lock. Use your ability to the max, now, Erica cried out through clenched teeth. She dropped her dagger and turned toward the tall, white-robed man in the distance. But as she looked, despair overtook her expression. Somehow, the two brothers had been engulfed by a massive Nen beast. The short brother inside was already shriveled into skin and bones, completely lifeless. And the tall one beside him looked no better, his body flattened like paper, as if all life had been drained from him. Panic overtook her. Erica spun on her remaining foot and began hopping away. She regretted everything, especially agreeing to intercept this monster. Knowing that turning her back on an enemy was suicide, she desperately pulled a handful of miniature bombs from her pocket and hurled them behind her to cover her escape. If Reo pursued, he'd be caught in the blast. What she didn't realize was that Reo wasn't just a melee fighter, he had ranged abilities, too. Raising his right hand to his chest, he mimicked the stance of a gunman. Bang! With his right index finger pointed forward like a pistol, Reo fired a Nen bullet. As Erica fled, she heard a distant pop, then the ground in front of her erupted as if struck by a missile. Gulp! She swallowed hard. She hadn't expected this guy to have ranged capabilities. Still, judging from that one blast, maybe it was a one-time trick. Yeah. Probably just the one, she lied to herself. From a distance, Reo frowned. He hadn't used this skill often and was still adjusting. The shot had veered off more than expected. But a smirk spread across his face. In the next instant, a black dome of aura expanded outward, stretching 100 meters and completely enveloping Erica. All right, now I can see clearly. Let's have some fun. He adjusted his aim, locked onto Erica's retreating form, and fired again. Da-da-da-da-da. His index finger released a flurry of Nen bullets, machine gun style, in a relentless barrage. Erica froze, spun around, and saw the hailstorm incoming. Her mouth twisted into a bitter grin. You've got to be kidding me. Those were her last words. Boom. Rumble. Rumble. The earth shook violently. Smoke and debris billowed several meters high. When it finally settled, all that remained was a shredded mess of flesh. Erica had been completely obliterated. Reo didn't even need to confirm it with his eyes, his end told him everything. Without missing a beat, he dashed toward the location of the Nen beast phantom. He had summoned it earlier, mid-battle, after realizing his speed had been compromised. While dodging Erica's throat strike, he had sent the beast to handle the two white-robed brothers. To avoid being detected, Reo had made the beast nearly invisible in size, allowing it to sneak up on them before transforming into a massive slime and engulfing them both. Once it began draining them, they had no chance to resist. What surprised Reo, though, was that the beast had actually drained them to death. That hadn't happened with Miragiel. He didn't dwell on it. There were still pursuers on the way, his end indicated they were about 2 minutes out. The battle with Erica had taken a full minute. That left him 1 minute to move. Reo picked up a dagger lying nearby and tucked it away as a backup weapon. Swoosh. He arrived at the brothers' remains. The contractor's note on his right hand automatically turned to the 9th page. To his surprise, both brothers' figures appeared simultaneously, and a new, combined ability formed. Gravity Control. After making contact with a target, this ability allows either a gravitational increase or reduction. Gravity Blessing applies 1x 100x gravity increase to a target. The greater the multiplier, the higher the Nen consumption. Gravity reduction, applies 1x 100x gravity reduction. Again, higher multipliers consume more Nen. Reo blinked in mild disbelief. This was the first time he'd seen two abilities fuse like this, and the result was far more practical than either power on its own. It was a clear improvement. Still, there wasn't time to marvel. With the ability secured, Reo dispelled the beast phantom and prepared to move. MMH. From his left arm, Menki, still wrapped in Nen, began to stir. Reo halted, then released her. Thud. As she emerged, a gunshot rang out. A bullet whizzed from an unknown direction, headed straight for Reo. Chapter 105. Although Reo didn't know where the sniper shot had come from, the moment the bullet was about to strike him, he instinctively dodged, guided purely by feeling. Swoosh. The ground beneath his feet cracked as he leapt aside, dust erupting beneath him. Earth and stone exploded outward in a chaotic spray. His body shot off like a cannonball in a new direction. Menki, who had just regained consciousness, still managed to react in time and dodge to the side as well. TCH. Caught up already? Reo clicked his tongue in irritation. He could sense the approaching white-robed enemies through his N. Then he glanced at Boara, still wrapped in Nen on his left arm. There was only a little healing left, but there was no time. Reo dismissed the healing aura and threw Boara out of the Nen cocoon. Ahem. Boara coughed a few times after landing, then gradually recovered. Menki, Reo. I don't think we'll be able to finish this mission, he muttered, surveying the battlefield. Reo shot him a glare. Thanks, Captain Obvious. That wasn't exactly helpful right now. Menki remained silent. As the mission leader, she was trying to decide whether to continue or retreat. But another sudden attack cut off her thoughts. Twang. The faint sound of contracting threads echoed through the air. Nearly invisible wires wrapped around all three of them from all sides. Reo immediately leapt up to avoid being ensnared, but his nameless long blade wasn't so lucky. It got caught in the threads. In the next moment, the wire yanked back, dragging the blade across the ground, cutting a deep groove in the earth. Reo released the sword and landed lightly on the ground. The others managed to avoid the threads as well, each using their own methods. But Reo had no time to focus on them. A sudden slash cut through the air toward him. The timing was perfect, just as he landed and hadn't yet regained balance. The attacker's sword was slightly longer than Rio's previous weapon, and a faint white aura trailed behind it. The sheer killing intent made the hairs on Rio's body stand on end. At this awkward angle, Reo couldn't step forward or back. He had no choice but to harden his right arm with Nen and try to block the incoming blade. Whip. The sword grazed his forearm, injuring the surface, but didn't break bone. Reo let out a small breath of relief. Without hesitation, he launched a sidekick toward the air. Bang! His foot connected with something solid, and the force sent him staggering backward. His leg went numb from the impact. Still, the distance between them had widened. Reo now had space to move freely. He pulled out the dagger he'd taken from Erica earlier. Just as she had done before, he wrapped Nen around the blade and extended it, forming a crude, makeshift long sword. Suddenly, the air shimmered in front of him. A tall, thin man emerged from the ripples, black hair neatly combed, face sharp and cold. "Your reaction speed's impressive," the man said with a calm smile. "A lot of people fall to me and Ellie's combo attacks. But not you, you defended and even fought back immediately. If the elders hadn't ordered me to kill you, I'd actually want to get to know you better. Oh, I'm Thor, by the way. What's your name?" Reo didn't answer. He just gave him a cold stare. After his time on Meteor City, Reo had learned not to trust anyone, especially not silver-tongued strangers who talked mid-battle. This guy was clearly stalling for time. Thor realized Reo wasn't falling for it and didn't seem bothered. He simply gripped his sword tighter and grinned, the corners of his mouth stretching unnaturally wide. "You killed Erica, that tells me you're strong. So let's have a proper fight. While you're still breathing." Thor's ability wasn't flashy. Just a sword. But it was dangerous enough. Reo didn't reply. He simply raised his makeshift sword and dagger, a small smile playing on his lips. Thor radiated far more pressure than Erica. This was the kind of fight that could kill him. And that made it a fight worth taking. "Nice gaze," Thor smirked. "Looks like you've accepted death." "So have I." As soon as he finished speaking, Reo launched forward. What Thor didn't see was the Nen beast forming behind Reo, nearly invisible to the eye, as it darted off into the distance. Swoosh! Rio's surroundings blurred as he rushed forward, his weapons aimed at Thor. This initial strike was a test. Judging by the intense aura Thor gave off, he'd been training for a long time. His swordsmanship wouldn't be simple. Still, Reo had absorbed several techniques from the two white-robed brothers. While his strength wasn't at its peak, he was operating at half capacity, more than enough for now. Their blades clashed. Zzzzzzk. Metal screeched as the weapons scraped violently against each other. Thor deftly lifted Rio's long blade and deflected it upward over his head. But that was just what Reo wanted. He'd left an intentional opening. If Thor took the bait and attacked, Rio's right knee, already reinforced with Nen, was ready to smash into him. Unfortunately, Thor wasn't that naive. He flicked his eyes downward, spotted the trap, and quickly retreated a few steps. In the next instant, twang! That same sound of threads tightening rang out again. Transparent wires curled around Reo from all directions. Damn it, Reo thought. The thread user from earlier was still hiding somewhere nearby. His N hadn't picked them up before. Just what kind of ability was this? Chapter 106 doesn't exist. So. Skip. Chapter 107. Reo looked down at the tall, thin man he had just defeated. After a brief pause, he stepped forward and pulled the long sword from his opponent's hand, gripping it tightly. He cast one last glance at the fallen man, then turned and dashed in the direction of Menki and Boara. He hadn't expected to encounter someone so skilled in a lawless place like Meteor City. It had caught him off guard. The battle with the swordsman had cost him over 10 seconds, and the enemy reinforcements were closing in. If he didn't leave with the others now, there might not be another chance. At that moment, Menki was engaged with the thread-wielding woman, and Boara was fending off a short opponent. Reo suspected it was this short man's ability that had allowed their enemies to approach undetected earlier. Seeing the last two enemies still holding out, Reo stomped hard on the ground, sending spider-web-like cracks spreading beneath him, and launched forward without hesitation. There was no time to worry about the noise, he needed to finish this quickly. He chose to target the short man first. The thread user's abilities didn't pose a threat to him, but this other one made Reo uneasy. Boom! A loud roar echoed as Reo landed. Both Boara and the short man turned toward the sound, startled. Reo charged in like a missile. Boara lit up when he saw him. From their brief time together, he'd already realized Rio's strength far surpassed his own. With Rio's help, this fight would end quickly. The short man wasn't so optimistic. He knew who Reo had just fought. The tall swordsman was among the top 3 fighters in the Elder Guard. And yet, in less than 15 seconds, Reo had slain him. The thought alone made him tremble. Splurt. Before the short man could even finish processing the fear, his view twisted. He saw his body fall. Wait. Is that my body? He hadn't even seen the strike. Reo had decapitated him in a single motion. Boara watched in astonishment. He hadn't even seen the movement, just a blur of white light, and then the enemy who'd kept him struggling for ages was dead in a single stroke. From his left arm, Reo summoned a black aura in the shape of an arm. The contractor's note appeared, automatically turning to the 10th page. But what came next was disappointing. Two abilities appeared in Reo's mind, both related to food. Appetite increases the user's hunger. Binge eating increases the amount of food the user can consume. Reo made a face and immediately dismissed the soul. These abilities were completely useless. With a scowl, he turned and dashed toward Menki. 5 more seconds wasted on trash. He ignored Buara, using Nen to enhance his feet and vanish from view. Swoosh. Reo appeared directly between Menki and the thread-wielding woman. Without a word, he swung his long blade with force. HxH. Blood sprayed across Reo's face, but he didn't even blink, wiping it away casually. Reo. Menki shouted in surprise as he cut down her opponent in a single strike. I spent over 10 seconds trying to deal with her, and he just ended it in an instant. Is this kid really something I taught? Or did I raise a devil? Menki looked at Reo, blood-splattered and calm, remembering when she first taught him the 4 principles of Nen. But Reo wasn't thinking about that. He simply pulled her into his arms and turned back toward Buara. From within his N, Reo sensed 19 more enemies approaching. The closest was less than 20 seconds away. They had no time. When they reached Buara, he was already running, but with his large size, he wasn't getting far fast. Reo caught up in seconds. Reo frowned at Buara's sluggish pace, then extended his Nen arm and wrapped him in a black aura, ignoring any protests. Gripping both Menki and Buara, Reo focused his aura into his legs and dashed forward at full speed. Blood streamed from his chest, trailing behind him. The injury from his earlier duel still hadn't been treated. Reo had no time, so he let it bleed. Menki, cradled in his arms, noticed his pallor and the blood loss. She frowned. A decision formed in her mind. A few hours later, the sun rose over Meteor City. Reo was still running. He had traveled from the border between the 11th and 12th districts all the way to the 6th district. And the pursuers hadn't given up. Thankfully, Reo had used hope for the dying again at dawn, this time on himself. It was the first time he'd used the ability on his own body. Previously, all 3 uses had been for Menki and Buara. He hadn't known what it felt like until now. Turns out, it wasn't pleasant. The wounds wriggled as they healed, creating a maddening itch. But Reo couldn't spare a hand to scratch. So he asked Menki. She glanced at him, then at Buara, snoring peacefully inside the protective black aura. Only then did she reluctantly reach out and scratch the itching spot for him. Meanwhile, Buara was out cold. The moment he realized he wasn't in danger, he fell into a deep sleep, completely unconcerned that Reo was still being hunted. Reo was exasperated. With a teammate like this, what can you do? Throughout the day's battle, it had become painfully clear, Buara and Menki were true food hunters. Amazing with ingredients, but when it came to combat, they were no match, even for the average Elder Guard member. Chapter 108. When Reo first arrived at Meteor City, he'd assumed the ordinary members of the Elder Guard in the 12th district were powerful, comparable to Menki. At the time, it seemed a reasonable conclusion. But now, he knew he had been wrong. It wasn't that the Elder Guards were exceptionally strong, Menki was simply too weak. Back then, Reo had only encountered a few Nen users, the guild president, whose strength was undisputed, and Menki. The president's power was in a league of its own, so Reo never used him as a benchmark. Menki, on the other hand, became his point of reference. So, when he later met other Nen users, like the average Elder Guard members, whose aura levels were similar to Menki's, he assumed they were all elite. But after the previous day's battle, Reo realized most of the Elder Guard had strength comparable to Menki. Only a few were on his level. If those people hadn't been relentlessly chasing him, Reo wouldn't even consider them a threat. He might have already turned back and sliced them down one by one. But Reo activated N, and in an instant, a pitch-black aura dome spread 200 meters in all directions from his center. 3 people. 1 on par with me. Guess they're not catching up. He smirked. He didn't know whether the Elder Guard had a healer among them, but of the 3 pursuing him now, none showed signs of recovery-type Nen abilities. They'd been chasing him for hours, their stamina and aura surely wearing thin. But they still kept coming. Reo had no idea why they were so obsessed. Still, if it had been a larger force, he might have kept running. But just 3? Perfect for a warm-up. HNN. Reo came to a sudden halt and gently lowered Menki, who was startled awake by the abrupt stop. Seeing her confused expression, Reo pointed behind them. The pursuers were now within 100 meters, Menki would sense them with her N soon enough. While she focused, Reo released Boara from the Nen cocoon around his left arm. The guy had slept for hours, arguably the most relaxed person among them. He let the aura disperse. Thud. Boara dropped like a rock, hitting the ground with a loud crash that caught the attention of nearby 6th District residents. A few onlookers stared at his massive body. For them, he wasn't a person, he was a food stockpile. Enough to feed 1 person for half a month. A few of them began licking their lips and showing predatory intent. Reo felt their eyes and scoffed. With a flick of his wrist, he summoned the long sword he'd taken from the tall, thin man. After running for so long, he might as well blow off some steam. 20 of them. Give me 1 minute. His feet slammed against the ground, and he vanished into the crowd. Crack. His blade slashed effortlessly, slicing 2 men in half at the waist. A clean, lightning-fast double kill. Without breaking stride, Reo adjusted his steps and darted toward another nearby man. That guy had seen Reo cut down 2 people instantly. Frozen in shock, he tried to run, but it was too late. Reo was already behind him. A single stroke removed his head. Roll. The severed head tumbled to Rio's feet, eyes still wide in disbelief. Reo casually kicked it toward another fleeing man, coating the head in Nen as he did. In an instant, it struck its target. Crack. The 2 heads collided and exploded in a burst of gore. Only then did Reo turn to face the rest of the would-be attackers. But just as he turned, an ordinary resident lunged with a small knife, aiming straight for Rio's back. From the precision and angle, it was clear, this guy was experienced at stabbing people in the back. Menki, still watching with N, saw the danger and shouted in panic. Reo. Behind you. Reo froze for a split second, just long enough to lose his perfect timing, but quickly layered his back in condensed Nen to absorb the blow. He could have easily dodged it himself, but Menki's warning had distracted him. Still, he wasn't upset. In fact, he felt something warm stir in his chest. In this cold, merciless world of Meteor City, Reo had grown colder himself, but Menki's concern sparked a small, welcome change. He flashed her a quick smile to show he was fine, then turned and decapitated the man who had tried to stab him. The man's shocked expression meant nothing to Reo. The remaining dozen residents, seeing 5 of their own slain in seconds, turned and fled toward the crowds. If their target had been weak, they would have pounced. But against a monster like Reo? They wanted to disappear into the masses and vanish. But today, they were out of luck. Reo reactivated N, locking onto the aura of every runner. He darted toward the nearest one and drove his blade through their chest. HxH. The long sword pierced the target's heart with a sickening sound. Without stopping, Reo pulled the blade free and chased down the next. Half a minute later, Reo stood over a field of corpses. He casually tossed the blood-stained sword to the ground, where it landed with a soft thud. The splattered blood formed a fan-shaped pattern on the dirt, unexpectedly artistic. Chapter 109. After finishing off the appetizers, the main course was about to begin. Reo could feel it in his N. The 3 pursuers who had been tailing him all night had finally arrived. Swoosh! All 3 appeared before him in an instant, though they looked a little worse for wear. It was no surprise. They had chased Reo from the border of Districts 11 and 12 all the way to District 6, through heaps of garbage and chemical-polluted wastelands. Even Reo himself was filthy at this point. He wasn't in the best mood. For someone with even a trace of hygiene consciousness, the state of his body was unbearable. And all because of them. Reo smirked at their disheveled appearances, mocking them without restraint. Yo! The 3 mighty elder guards look like you've been dragged through a sewer. Even your pristine white robes turned black. And after all that trouble, you came all this way. Just to die. At his taunt, the largest and most muscular of the 3 snarled. His brow twitched, veins bulging on his forehead, and his mouth quivered with barely restrained fury. It took him a moment to respond. You coward. After all that running, you dare talk big? If you hadn't taken out my subordinates, I wouldn't have chased you this far. If you've got the guts, then fight me properly. The man was a hulking brute, his body packed with corded muscle, obviously a transmutation-type user. Reo could tell right away. Guys like this always had the same traits: intense focus, brutal determination, and often a frustratingly rigid mindset. Like Gon in the original series, stubborn and relentless during the Hunter exam. Or Uvogin from the Phantom Troop, so obsessed with fighting that he'd waste no time. This brute had chased Reo for hours across city zones. That kind of persistence spoke volumes. Still, Reo liked fighting people like this. They didn't mess around with tricks, just raw, straight-up combat. He scanned the man from top to bottom, genuinely intrigued. Oh? What kind of fight are you thinking? The big man's eyes lit up. He hadn't expected Reo to agree. He'd been testing him, figuring Reo would keep running. But to have his challenge accepted outright? That thrilled him. Hey. In that case, how about a deathmatch? Reo nodded. He asked the question to gauge the guy's mindset, but he was already prepared for this outcome. After all, this was Meteor City. No one survived here without stepping over a pile of corpses. The brute's mouth stretched into a wide grin. Clearly, Reo was just his type of opponent. Craigie, Lucien, you 2 handle the other 2. He gestured to Menki and Boara, who had just woken up. His companions nodded and moved to intercept them. Reo didn't interfere. From his end, he could tell those 2 were around the same strength as Menki and Boara. Let them settle their own fights. Honestly, Reo was tired of playing nanny. Menki was his girl, he had no problem protecting her. But Boara? That guy had been dead weight the whole trip. If not for Menki's earlier request to bring him along, Reo wouldn't have bothered. All right, Reo said, stretching his arms. Now that the distractions are gone, let's fight. He found the brute a bit unhinged, but also amusing. The big man beamed even wider. Then, without warning, his aura erupted. Blood-red nen surged around him, completely enveloping his body. His figure vanished within the swirling energy. What emerged was something monstrous. A towering beast nearly 2.5 meters tall, with arms thick like logs and covered in coarse, black, needle-like hair. 2 bone-white claws scraped the ground. He looked more beast than man, like a monstrous chimpanzee. Roar! The creature pounded its chest and let out a wild, echoing howl. Waves of bloodlust rippled from him. Reo stared, unimpressed. He wouldn't be forming a contract with this guy, not a chance. No matter how strong he was, Reo had standards. And this thing wasn't pretty. The beast grinned and tore a massive 3-meter-wide concrete slab from the ground with one hand. It twirled it like a toy, then hurled it straight at Reo. Boom! Reo calmly sidestepped. The chunk of concrete slammed into the earth, shattering it and forming a massive crater. Reo raised an eyebrow. That power. On par with mine, even though he's using a transformation ability. Gotta admit, it's impressive. Typical enhancement class brute force. The beast exhaled, a blood-red mist spewing from its mouth. Ha ha ha. Fighting someone strong like you. Feels damn good. The creature's voice had changed, guttural, raspy, almost incoherent. The transformation seemed to affect his personality, too. Reo narrowed his eyes. This wasn't just a fight anymore, this thing was a predator now. He quietly summoned a Nen beast, invisible to the naked eye, and sent it floating toward the creature's body. Reo remained cautious. Before the transformation, this guy had come off as a battle-hungry maniac. But now, he radiated pure, bloodthirsty instinct. No way Reo was charging in headfirst. He began to circle, feet light on the ground, eyes never leaving the beast. The creature mirrored his movement, tracking Reo carefully, always keeping him in front. The fight was just beginning. Chapter 110. Reo and the tall man, now in his savage gorilla form, had been in a stalemate for quite some time. Reo knew it couldn't continue like this, so he prepared to go on the offensive. The moment he decided, he charged forward. The gorilla raised its massive arms, ready to counter, forcing Reo to retreat again. TCH. What a pain to fight someone like this. Still, a small smile crept across Rio's lips. He could feel the energy from the Nen beast phantom starting to flow into him. This fight's already in the bag. The phantom beast's ability was simple but brutal. Once it latched onto an enemy and began absorbing energy, there was no escape. During the absorption phase, the phantom was invulnerable, and the victim couldn't break free, no matter how powerful they were. All Reo had to do was stall. The chimp-like beast grew impatient. With a roar that shook the air, it dropped to all fours and lunged at Reo with explosive force. Though it wasn't particularly fast in its base form, the Nen-enhanced transformation gave it terrifying acceleration. It charged like a runaway freight train. Reo, watching the shift from slow to blindingly fast, suddenly thought of the new ability he had gained. Perfect time to test it out. He extended his right hand, palm out, toward the incoming brute. Gravity blessing, 10x. Boom. The savage gorilla slammed into an invisible wall of weight and dropped straight to the ground. Reo felt about 2% of his aura disappear. This ability sure burns through aura quickly. Across from him, the gorilla struggled and flailed on the ground. After several seconds, it managed to push itself up slightly, clearly fighting the pressure. He actually stood up. Not bad, Reo thought. This guy really is built like a classic enhancer. Gravity blessing, 20x. Boom. The gorilla crashed down again, this time with no chance of getting up. It could only whimper, completely flattened by the force. Its earlier taunts were gone. Under this crushing gravity, it couldn't even speak. Reo felt another 4% of his aura disappear and let out a low sigh. Even with his massive reserves, the drain was intense. He realized that if someone like Minky tried to use this ability, she'd be tapped out after just a 5x boost. No wonder the white-robed brother who originally had this skill only used it for support. The energy demands were absurd. Even Reo hadn't been able to unleash its full potential yet. Meanwhile, the beast was still lying prone, helpless beneath the crushing weight. And something strange was happening. Its aura was depleting far faster than expected. Within just a few minutes of battle, it had lost over 30% of its Nen reserves. For an enhancer, that was extremely abnormal. It glanced toward Reo with bloodshot eyes, sensing something was wrong. Reo just smirked. With a casual wave, he deactivated the gravity blessing. He hadn't come here just to test new powers. This had been personal, he wanted to vent. The experiment was just a bonus. Reo gripped his long sword and stared down the beast as it slowly rose again. The gorilla roared, eyes wild, and charged a second time. A gust of wind blew toward Reo. The beast reared up and slashed down with a massive claw aimed at Rio's head. Reo leaned to the side, the claw grazing his ear and tugging free a tuft of hair with a rush of wind. But before Reo could counter, the gorilla's steel-like body hair suddenly stood on end, and shot toward him like needles. Reo hadn't expected that and didn't dodge completely. His right arm was punctured in several spots. TCH. He clicked his tongue in irritation. He'd let his guard down. But now it was time to stop holding back. Tightening his grip on his blade, Reo lunged forward. The savage gorilla saw the shift and responded with a brutal overhead strike. Boom! Their clash shattered the ground beneath them, sending cracks radiating outward and clouds of dust into the air. Reo felt the weight behind the gorilla's punch through the hilt of his sword and winced slightly. The force was even greater than he'd anticipated. Boom! Another massive shadow loomed overhead. Reo leapt back just in time as the beast's other arm came crashing down. It hit the ground like a meteor, cracking earth, creating a crater, and sending rubble flying. A shard of stone hit Reo in the face, burning his skin. Didn't expect this guy to pull a move like that, Reo thought. He dodged just in time, but if he hadn't, the impact would have shattered bones. The savage gorilla thumped its chest, letting out a deafening roar. But it didn't notice something important: its body had started to shrink. The more it attacked, the more energy the phantom beast siphoned away. By now, the Nen Phantom had restored about 4% of Reo's aura, bringing him back to 8% after burning 6% on the gravity blessings. The tide was turning. Hey hunters! Just a quick break. Hopefully you're enjoying this fanfic. Let's keep going. Chapter 111. Reo was in great shape, but the savage gorilla facing him wasn't. Their aura reserves were similar in volume, but while Reo's was recovering thanks to the phantom beast, the gorilla's was depleting rapidly, perhaps even faster than Reo's was replenishing. In Reo's eyes, this beast was already finished. It was just a matter of time. Still, Reo had no plans to let the creature drag things out. He wanted to end it, and vent his frustration. Swoosh! Reo surged forward, Nen gathering beneath his feet. His long blade gleamed with blue light as it sliced the air, sharper than ever under a fresh coat of aura. Whip! He slashed directly at the gorilla's chest. With the beast's aura weakened, its defense had dropped, his blade cut clean through its black, bristled fur and into flesh. Roar! Roar! The gorilla howled in agony. It couldn't comprehend how its formerly impenetrable defense had failed. But Reo didn't let up. His next strike followed immediately, the blade biting deeper with each swing. The earlier strike had been a test. Now that he knew the beast couldn't block effectively anymore, he went all in. Of course, just because the gorilla's defenses were broken didn't mean Reo would get careless. Quite the opposite. He was fully focused now. A wounded beast was even more dangerous. He swung again. Clang! The gorilla raised an arm to block, aura condensing tightly along it, but Reo's strike still tore a gash down its forearm. His corrosive aura clung to the wound, eating away at it. Rawr! The beast roared in pain again, but pressed on, swinging back at Reo with the other arm like a sledgehammer. Reo twisted just in time. The air rushed past his face, scattering loose strands of hair. He retaliated immediately, slashing in a rapid combo, cutting through the air and into the beast again and again. The two clashed at close quarters. Sparks flew with every impact. Dozens of exchanges happened in mere seconds. Nearby, residents of District 6 began to gather. Shocked faces peered out from alleyways and rooftops. Despite this being Meteor City, curiosity still reigned, especially when it came to watching powerful people fight. There was always something to learn. Or exploit. Reo didn't like it. He was currently a wanted man by the elders of District 12. If the elders of District 6 got involved, things could get complicated. That meant it was time to finish this. His Nen had climbed back up to 90%, there was no need to hold back anymore. He channeled a large amount of aura into his blade, the air around him growing heavy and turbulent. Swoosh! With a stomp, he launched forward like a missile. Roar! The gorilla saw him coming and roared in defiance, slamming a fist downward. Reo twisted mid-charge, shifting direction with a light step, and suddenly, he was face to face with the monster. He looked up into its gaping mouth. The corner of his mouth lifted. Time to end this. HxH. His blade slashed across the massive throat, right at the Adam's apple. A geyser of blood sprayed into the air, drenching Reo. He didn't flinch. He wiped his face and calmly turned toward Menki and Boara. They were still locked in battle with the remaining two enemies. For Reo, it would only take a few seconds to clean this up. He ran toward Menki's side first. Shink! He appeared in front of her opponent and drove his blade straight through the man's heart, ignoring the stunned expression on his face. As the enemy dropped, the contractor's note flared to life. Two new entries appeared in Reo's mind. Maggie back his barren potential for Nen. Thief from another world, randomly steals an item from another world. Cooldown, 30 days. Reo raised an eyebrow at the second one. Interesting. He selected it, but now wasn't the time to dig deeper. Swoosh. He dashed toward Boara next, his figure a blur. The man fighting Boara looked panicked now, but before he could run, Reo appeared behind him and struck with the side of his hand. Crack! The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Menki approached, looking confused. Boara, too, wore a puzzled expression. Why had Reo spared this one? Seeing their looks, Reo sighed and resisted the urge to facepalm. Seriously? Even now? He muttered. We're still on a mission, Reo reminded them. Our objective is to retrieve a Saint Sweet Lotus seed. But we're fugitives, being hunted. There's no time to gather intel ourselves, so we get it from the people we already have. He kicked the unconscious man lightly. This guy's a great source of information. Menki's face flushed slightly with shame. Boara scratched his head, embarrassed. As a food hunter, Boara wasn't used to thinking tactically like this. Menki, on the other hand, felt deeply guilty. She had nearly abandoned the mission earlier. But Reo hadn't. Even now, in the thick of danger, he was still focused on completing the task. That realization stung her. Chapter 112. Reo looked at the two in front of him, unsure of what to say. He opened his mouth, then closed it again without a word. Without further explanation, he dragged the unconscious man along, activated N to find an empty house nearby, and led Menki and Boara there to rest. Reo didn't hesitate to crash. After casually washing the blood from his body, he laid down and quickly fell asleep. He was exhausted from the relentless combat of the past day. As for Menki and Boara, the captive wasn't someone Reo needed to interrogate himself, he left that to them. By the time Reo woke up, the sky outside had already gone dark. In the corner of the room, a dismembered corpse lay quietly. Menki and Boara were nowhere in sight. Reo pulled some food from his void storage, munching as he tried to calm the hunger gnawing at his stomach. After eating, he leaned back against the wall to rest. Yesterday's battles had taken a toll, even someone of his strength felt it. Roughly half an hour passed before the door creaked open and Menki and Boara stepped inside. They didn't seem surprised to see Reo awake and simply sat down in front of him. We finished the interrogation, Menki said. That guy you captured, turns out, he was the one in charge of guarding the St. Ganbilion. Reo raised an eyebrow in surprise. He hadn't expected their luck to be that good. Menki grinned, recognizing the expression. That was our reaction too. She continued, the one you fought earlier, the tall guy who transformed, was the deputy captain of the Elder Guard from District 12. He and the other two were specifically assigned to protect the St. Ganbilion. They've been guarding it for 6 years straight, Boara added. Reo nodded. That was important. If these three had been the only ones responsible for the Lotus, then with them gone, no one would immediately notice the breach. They just happened to be out when we crossed paths, Menki said. The deputy captain found out his subordinates had been defeated and went after you for revenge. But, well, we all know how that ended. Reo gave a small nod. He still couldn't believe how neatly things had worked out. So, what about the lotus itself? He asked. Is it confirmed? With a pleased look, Menki motioned to Boara. Boara stood, lifted his shirt to reveal his massive belly, and reached into it, literally. His hand sank into his stomach like it was water, a technique made possible through Nen. A moment later, he pulled his hand out, holding a transparent box of soil. Growing from it was a pristine white lotus. Ta-da! Menki leapt forward proudly and pointed at the flower. This is the Saint Ganbelion, only capable of surviving in Meteor City. As soon as we confirmed the info, we went to retrieve it. Reo twitched slightly. He had fought tooth and nail for an entire day, and yet they'd retrieved the mission target this easily the next day. It was a bit hard to swallow. You're sure it's the real thing? He asked, squinting at the flower. It's not some fake or look-alike? Menki's cheerful expression vanished instantly. Her eyes flared. Seriously, Reo? We didn't ask you to come because we knew how exhausted you were. We risked everything to sneak in and grab it, and now you're doubting us? Humph. I must have been blind to fall for someone like you. Her voice rose with each word. Boara, sitting beside her, winced at the outburst. Menki was beautiful, yes, but her fiery temper made her notorious. Many in the association had admired her, but few dared pursue her. Reo, in that moment, earned a new level of respect from Boara. Meanwhile, Reo immediately realized his mistake. Okay, my bad, he said quickly. It's just. It happened so fast. I didn't expect the mission to wrap up this easily. Forgive me, alright? I've been fighting non-stop for days. Menki huffed. Humph. Fine, I'll forgive you, this time. But don't forget, you're a food hunter now too. Start acting like one. Reo nodded obediently. He knew how to handle her by now. Let her vent, and she'd cool off quickly. With that storm past, Menki moved on. Now that we've got the mission target, there's no point staying here. If we hang around too long, we'll just keep running into more enemies. I've decided, we're leaving Meteor City tonight. It's time to disappear before the next Elder Guard squad finds us. Chapter 113. When Reo heard what Menki said, he nodded in agreement. It was true, if they stayed in Meteor City any longer, they'd only face more danger. Escaping under cover of night was the safest move. Boara, who stood nearby, didn't respond, likely because Menki had already discussed the plan with him ahead of time. Menki was simply informing Reo out of courtesy, even though the decision had already been made. Reo understood his position. Menki was the leader of this mission, so he had no objection. Yeah. You're the captain. Decide when we leave, I'll follow your lead. Menki nodded, satisfied with his response. Good. In that case, let's move now. The sooner we're out of here, the better. Reo stood and stretched. After resting for so long, his body had grown stiff. Once he loosened up, the three of them made their way toward the door, prepared to leave Meteor City for good. After 4 a.m. the trio had made it near District 1, not far from the city's exit. Once they passed through this final district, they'd be free. Feeling close to freedom, their tension began to ease after hours of urgent travel. What they didn't realize was that the true danger still awaited them. Though Meteor City was governed by a council of elders, the districts often competed against one another, especially District 12, the poorest of them all. To survive, they frequently lobbied for more resources. But resources in a wasteland like Meteor City were scarce. Most came from outside trade, weapons, services, and manpower exchanged with criminal gangs. With District 12 in disarray, and its elder guard humiliated. It was unrealistic to expect help from other districts without offering something in return. So, after negotiations, the elders of Districts 11 and 12 paid a price to mobilize the Elder Guard members from other districts. At this point, Reo and the others were already near District 1, and the only ones who could stop them now were the first district's Elder Guards. But these guards weren't fools. Rather than chase the fugitives across city zones, they simply positioned themselves at Meteor City's exit and waited. On the move, Reo, Menki, and Boara continued running. Menki estimated that they were only a few minutes from escape. "Once we're outside, we'll be safe," she said. "Even Meteor City's power doesn't reach beyond the desert." Both Reo and Boara nodded. They picked up the pace, ready to be free of this nightmare. But as they ran, Reo felt something off. A creeping sensation. It was faint at first, but steadily growing stronger. "We're being watched." Reo abruptly stopped. "Wait. Something's wrong." Menki and Boara stopped as well. As food hunters, their combat perception wasn't strong. They hadn't noticed anything unusual. Reo closed his eyes, focused, but detected nothing. So he activated both Ten and Ren, then deployed N. A pitch-black aura dome, 200 meters in radius, expanded from his body. "Nothing?" Reo frowned. Aside from the three of them, there were no life signs in range. But I was sure someone was watching. He had been through constant combat for 2 days straight. His nerves were hypersensitive. He wasn't the type to mistake this kind of feeling. Menki noticed his expression. "Did you sense something?" Reo shook his head. "I don't know. I felt something, someone watching us. But my N picked up nothing." "It's weird." Menki was surprised. She knew just how impressive Rio's N was. Most Nen users could only reach 10 meters. Rio's extended 200. For someone to completely evade that was shocking. "Maybe you're just paranoid," she said. "There's no one here." Boara nodded. He hadn't sensed anything either. Reo frowned. "Maybe they're right. Maybe it was just nerves. All right. Let's move. But something still feels off. I have a bad feeling." Menki and Boara agreed, and the group resumed their sprint. Reo moved to the center position, Boara in front, Menki in the rear. This way, Reo could react quickly to danger from either direction. A few minutes later, Reo was glad he'd taken precautions. They were nearing the exit now. It was just visible ahead, but his unease had grown worse. And then, boom! A large caliber shell, wrapped in dense Nen, rocketed toward them from the front. It moved too fast to dodge. In the blink of an eye, it was upon them. Reo acted without hesitation. He leapt ahead of Boara, placing himself between the shell and his teammates. Calculating the timing in his head, he reached out with his right hand. Mother's love. A translucent, indestructible shield materialized before him, lasting only 1 second. But it was enough. Boom. Croc-coon. The Nen-coated shell slammed into the shield, triggering a shockwave that rocked the air and lit up the sky with a blinding explosion. The sound echoed through Meteor City. Chapter 114. The shell collided with the transparent shield, erupting into a thunderous explosion that created a massive mushroom cloud. The shockwave was deafening. For a moment, Reo felt like the entire world had been thrust into a furnace. Smoke and dust surged upward into the sky, forming a half-egg dome. A ring-shaped layer of gas formed around the middle, with a towering column of force holding it all up, strikingly beautiful, in a terrifying way. Beautiful. If you were the one who fired the shell. To Reo and his team, it was more like the swing of death's scythe. Ka. After just 1 second, the shield began to crack, and then it shattered in front of Rio's eyes. The life-saving ability, Mother's Love, could only be used once per hour. Now it was gone. If another powerful attack followed, Reo would have no defense. But he had no regrets. Without the shield, Buara and Menki would have been killed instantly. Only he might have barely survived. As the transparent barrier vanished, the heat from the explosion scorched the air, curling their hair from the intensity. Reo activated his N, expanding a pitch-black aura field with a 200-meter radius around him to detect any enemies. One target? He sensed a single presence. A blood-red giant, nearly 3 meters tall, with bulging muscles and a bald head. Mist-like blood vapor rose off his body. Thick restraint rings clamped around both shoulders, and a giant, still smoking cannon sat beside him. The Nen emanating from this man stunned Reo. Rio's own aura reserves were considered immense, even among veteran hunters, but this man's passive output matched him. And that wasn't even factoring in his full power. Reo guessed that the man's total aura capacity was at least 3 times his own. His stomach dropped. If this turned into a pure aura contest, he was already outmatched. But Phantom Beast. A grin curled across Rio's lips. Pitch-black aura formed before him, and within seconds, a small bee, invisible to the naked eye, buzzed quietly into the air. Since gaining this ability, Rio's fear of powerful enemies had diminished. If they couldn't kill him in one move, they were already as good as dead. Suddenly, Reo sensed movement. The giant crouched low, his muscles swelling violently as he compressed Nen beneath his feet. He raised his head, locked eyes with Reo, and smiled. Rio's eyes widened. "Scatter," he shouted to Menki and Buara. The pose. The technique. He recognized it. The giant's aura surged wildly, and in the next instant, he exploded toward Reo like a cannonball. Boom! A massive sonic burst echoed through the wasteland. Reo saw the man streaking toward him like a crimson meteor. Gritting his teeth, Reo conjured a massive hand of aura to grab Buara and flung him away. His other hand gripped Menki's wrist and hurled her in the opposite direction. "Don't look back. Just run." Right after, Reo condensed a dense aura shield around his left arm. Bang! Dust and rubble blasted skyward, blinding everything. The giant slammed directly into Rio's shield. Gah! The impact sent shockwaves through Rio's body. He coughed up blood instantly. The dark shield on his arm shattered on contact, but the recoil launched him backward, preventing a direct hit to his body. If the blow had landed clean, Reo might have died on the spot. "Yo, nice reaction, little dwarf." The deep, rumbling voice came from within the smoke. Reo didn't respond. He was too busy bracing himself. The gap between their power was obvious. "Tsk. And here I thought you'd be more fun." A thick arm lunged through the smoke, grasping at him. Reo leapt back, avoiding the grab. The giant, impatient, swung his arm through the dust cloud. Whoosh! In one sweep, he blew the smoke away like a fan, revealing his towering form. He grinned at Reo, eyes sparkling with curiosity. Reo knew that look. It was the look he gave a toy he didn't want to break too soon. But Reo wasn't backing down. He stepped forward slowly. He didn't believe he could win, but there was no turning back now. Besides, he's interesting. That makes this worth it. "Don't break too soon," Reo smirked, voice raised to match the giant's tone. "I'd hate for the fun to end early." The giant's grin grew wider. "What's your name, swordsman?" Rio's blade appeared in his hand. He didn't argue the title. "Reo. My name's Reo." The man cracked an even bigger smile. "Steinbeck. Remember it, it's the name of the man who's going to kill you." The instant Steinbeck finished speaking, Reo struck first. He lunged forward, no more words, just instinct and intent. His right hand twisted the blade and stabbed forward. Shunk. The strike was stopped cold, Steinbeck's passive aura blocked it completely. Reo didn't falter. This was just the first probe. He stepped back lightly. Boom. Steinbeck's blood-red fist smashed down where Reo had just stood, fracturing the ground like shattered glass. Web-like cracks spread several meters in every direction. Chapter 115. Swoosh. After dodging Steinbeck's blow, Reo lunged forward again. The long blade in his hand sliced through the air with a sharp whimper, glinting white under the moonlight as it arced toward Steinbeck's neck. Clang. The crisp sound of metal striking metal rang out. Reo frowned. His blade had struck Steinbeck's bare flesh, and it hadn't even left a cut. The impact jolted through the weapon, numbing Reo's right hand. Steinbeck, on the other hand, simply brushed his neck with one hand. There was a faint white mark where the blade had landed, but it hadn't broken the skin. Even the corrosive aura clinging to Reo's weapon seemed to have no effect. Within seconds, the white line vanished entirely. He healed instantly. Reo's frown deepened. The gap between them was vast. They weren't even in the same league. And then, he saw Menki and Buara running toward him from the distance. Idiots. Reo cursed under his breath. Why come back now? Just run. You're only going to make things worse. Steinbeck had noticed them too. Swoosh. He vanished. Damn it, Reo spat and disappeared after him. From his view, Buara barely had time to react before a shadow dropped from the sky. Bam! A fist smashed into Buara's gut, and the giant man collapsed instantly, unconscious. Steinbeck raised a foot, ready to stomp and finish him. Swoosh! Reo appeared between them, kicking upward into Steinbeck's descending leg. Their legs collided midair. To an onlooker, it looked absurd, a lithe 1.8-meter man locking legs with a 3-meter muscle giant. Reo was lean and athletic, while Steinbeck's build was thick and brutal, like a mountain of flesh. Even Menki, who had just arrived, was stunned. She couldn't believe that Buara had been taken out with a single punch, and now Reo was facing the same monster head-on. You care a lot about that lump of meat, Steinbeck said, raising a curious brow. Reo kept his eyes locked. He's my teammate. I'm not letting him die. Steinbeck chuckled and stepped back. Swoosh. Then, without warning, he kicked at Reo again. Reo met it head-on, his leg snapping forward to clash once more. Bang! 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 In mere seconds, they exchanged a dozen kicks above Buara's head. Each blow sent shockwaves across the ground. Despite Steinbeck's massive size and strength, Reo matched him, technique against brute force. Eventually, both stopped, legs hovering in tension, then slowly lowered. Steinbeck grinned, his gaze wild. You've earned it. I won't kill those two. Settle it with me. Reo was surprised by the offer, but he wasn't about to question it. Menki. He called. Take Buara. Head to the Hunter Association. If I survive, I'll find you. If not, burn some incense. It sounded like a joke, but Reo meant every word. He didn't expect to live through this. He used his foot to hook Buara's limp body and kicked him toward Menki. Swoosh. Menki caught him and froze. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Despite growing up in Meteor City, she had lived a relatively peaceful life, sheltered by her mother's nen. This was her first taste of such overwhelming despair. She knew what Reo was doing. And she knew she couldn't stop him. So she cried, picked up Buara, and ran toward the exit. 2 glistening tears hit the ground where Reo stood. He watched her silhouette grow smaller. When she disappeared, he turned back to Steinbeck. Let's go. A strange growl came from Steinbeck's throat. The blood-red aura around him flared violently. Boom. The ground trembled beneath his feet as his power exploded outward, kicking up clouds of dust. Reo didn't flinch. His own dark aura deepened, thickening like smoke. Boom. Their auras clashed, 2 titanic forces pressing against one another. A violent wind surged between them, scattering dust in all directions. Futilda. A gale roared across the field. And then, they vanished. Whoosh! Steinbeck appeared behind Reo in a blur. The sound of air tearing apart accompanied his movement. Reo ducked. A massive blood-red fist whooshed over his head. If it had landed, the fight would have been over in one hit. But Reo didn't retreat. Instead, he twisted, slashing upward with his right hand. His blade, now drenched in black aura, gleamed like obsidian. It arced toward Steinbeck's neck, sharp enough to cut steel. Chapter 116. Another white mark appeared on Steinbeck's neck. He didn't seem to care. With a casual grunt, he swung a heavy fist toward Reo, confident that Reo's nen couldn't pierce his flesh. But Reo had already leapt back, anticipating the attack. He landed smoothly and narrowed his eyes. He didn't need to break through entirely, not yet. As long as he could cut Steinbeck, even a little, he had a chance. If he could keep cutting, again and again, eventually, the enemy would fall. Reo, stop running. Fight me like a man. Ha ha ha. Steinbeck hammered the ground and roared with laughter. Reo kept his distance. Wrapped in blood-red aura, Steinbeck was an overwhelming presence, but Reo had a plan. This was going to be a war of attrition. With the phantom beast slowly siphoning energy from Steinbeck, Reo could afford to wait. Steinbeck might have triple the nen reserves, but he was burning through them recklessly. Reo just needed to survive long enough. He felt the first trickle of energy flowing into him from the beast. That was his sign. Across from him, Steinbeck grew bored of the silence. He spat to the side and charged again. Reo moved. His feet gathered aura, and with a burst of power. Boom! A crater exploded beneath him as he launched toward Steinbeck. In an instant, he was in front of him. The long knife gleamed under the moonlight, slashing once again at Steinbeck's neck. Reo had fixated on that spot. It was a bad habit born from countless street fights in Meteor City. The blade hit flesh. Another white mark. Another burst of corrosive nen. And again, Steinbeck ignored it. He didn't even bother wiping the mark away this time. Instead, he clenched his fists and launched a barrage of punches. Dozens of fist shadows filled the air. Reo struck again. The blade found flesh for the third time. This time, blood spilled. It was the first time since the battle began. But Reo paid a steep price. Gah! Steinbeck's fist slammed into Reo's stomach. His shirt tore open from the force, revealing a deep bruise already turning purple-black. Reo staggered, blood pouring from his mouth. Hope for the dying. He used his healing skill. One of 3 available for the day. A dark aura enveloped his stomach. The bruises began to fade. As warmth spread through him, Reo wiped the blood from his mouth, eyes still locked on Steinbeck. Steinbeck's expression twisted into something euphoric. The fact that Reo could recover meant this toy could last longer. He charged again. Reo countered with another slash, but Steinbeck's fists didn't stop. Reo dodged, then caught an opening. The giant's chest was exposed. Reo's blade moved like lightning. But Steinbeck grinned and swept out a hand, catching Reo's wrist. Reo's eyes narrowed. He twisted his wrist, redirected the attack, and slashed again at Steinbeck's neck. Schlick. The blade sank in, just a few millimeters, but it stuck. Reo tried to pull it back. It wouldn't budge. He's clenching his neck muscles? Steinbeck had trapped the blade between hardened muscle fibers. Reo didn't waste time. He let go of the blade and rolled to the side, barely dodging the next punch. So this is your toy? Ha ha ha. Crack. Steinbeck yanked the long knife from his neck and snapped it in half with both hands. Snap. Snap. He tossed the broken weapon aside. Reo stared for a moment, emotions stirring, then stilled them. It wasn't mine anyway. Just a tool. If it's not in my hands, it's useless. He stepped back and raised his right arm, focusing his aura. On his left side, he condensed a new arm of dark nen, complete with sculpted muscle lines. It was time for hand-to-hand. He shaped the arm with precision, optimizing it for clean punches and tight technique. Steinbeck's eyes lit up. He was delighted. First, swordplay. Then kicks. Now, fists. This toy kept surprising him. To Steinbeck, Reo was more valuable than the reward the elders had promised. Reo tested the arm with a few quick jabs. Steinbeck didn't interrupt. He simply stood there, grinning like a maniac. To him, this was playtime, and his favorite toy had just leveled up. Chapter 117. Although Reo said he was just stretching his body, he was, in truth, stalling for time. The phantom beast was now feeding him more and more energy, nearly the equivalent of 5 times Menki's Nen reserves. That was already half of Reo's. But for Steinbeck, who had 5 times Reo's capacity to begin with, this amount was only a fifth of his total power. He hadn't noticed the drain at all. Strength-type Nen users tended to be either simple-minded or stubborn in certain ways. Reo knew Steinbeck wouldn't notice the gradual loss until it was too late, and there was no way he'd point it out himself. This was Steinbeck's trap to fall into. Reo made a few quick movements to prepare, noting Steinbeck's growing impatience. He raised his arms into a tight stance, signaling he was ready. Steinbeck didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, or boiling. Bang! With a stomp that cracked the earth, Steinbeck lunged at Reo with a powerful kick. What Reo didn't know was that before Steinbeck awakened his Nen abilities, he had been a Muay Thai fighter, an underground champion with countless brutal matches under his belt. He'd even faced off against some of the top fighters in criminal syndicates. After awakening Nen, his strength surged to the top of his tier, and eventually, Muay Thai became boring. He couldn't find opponents that pushed him. He abandoned it. But now, seeing Reo's martial stance stirred something inside him. It reminded him of his glory days in the ring. So for the first time in years, he used Muay Thai again. Of course, Reo knew none of this. Bang! Reo's Nen-forged left arm rose to block Steinbeck's kick, but even so, he was shoved backward several meters from the force. That kick was heavier than any of the earlier ones. Reo was stunned. The angle and precision were textbook Muay Thai, perfect, even. He wasn't sure he could replicate that movement cleanly himself. Who the hell is this guy? Steinbeck didn't give him time to think. He charged again. In the ring, Steinbeck had always fought with a ruthless, overwhelming style, trading blow for blow, never stepping back. It was known as destructive fighting. You either broke the enemy, or broke yourself trying. Relentless. Unforgiving. Reo had once fought like that in the black market circuits. But too many times, he'd left the ring with more wounds than wins. Eventually, he switched to a more calculated approach. Now, the two fighters stood for two extremes, raw destruction versus strategic survival. Swoosh. Steinbeck dashed forward, weaving left and right like a panther sizing up prey. Pang! He lunged with a sweeping leg aimed low, followed by a jab and a right straight toward Reo's gut. Reo knew this rhythm. He trained against it. He stepped back, dodging the sweep, then swayed left and right, avoiding both punches with razor-thin margins. He countered immediately, swinging a heavy right punch toward Steinbeck's throat. But Steinbeck was ready. Arms came up in a tight guard, pang. Reo's punch slammed into Steinbeck's forearms instead. Reo didn't stop. His right foot swept low in a tight arc, aiming to knock Steinbeck off his feet. Swoosh. The air cracked around his shin. Snap. But instead of toppling Steinbeck, pain jolted through Reo's leg. His brow twitched. What the hell is that guy's lower body made of? Steinbeck didn't miss the opening. Just as Reo was recovering from the failed sweep, Steinbeck crouched low, shot forward, and twisted into a punch at Reo's side. Bang! The blow landed on Reo's arms, thankfully raised just in time. He had anticipated the vulnerability after a sweep. But it wasn't over. Steinbeck followed up with a brutal side kick. Peng! Hammering Rio's guard again and forcing him to slide back. TSSSK, Reo hissed under his breath. The blow had rattled his forearms. But he didn't let the momentum go to waste. As Steinbeck was still recovering from the kick, Reo dropped his arms and surged forward. Wham! Wham! A rapid combination punch aimed at Steinbeck's unguarded side. Chapter 118. Since Rio's long knife had been broken, he could no longer target the neck, so he naturally shifted his aim to the most accessible spot, Steinbeck's abdomen. Peng! Of course, Steinbeck wasn't going to let Reo attack so easily. He dodged to the side and immediately counterattacked. The two exchanged blow after blow. Reo punched, Steinbeck kicked. Despite Steinbeck being far stronger, he couldn't knock Reo down. Reo, meanwhile, was constantly wearing him down. His own aura was being replenished through the Beast Phantom, while Steinbeck steadily drained. Their intense back and forth dragged on for over half an hour. During that time, Rio's aura had not only returned to peak condition but had begun to overflow. Steinbeck, however, was now down to less than half of his original aura, about on par with Reo. If we consider Menki's aura level at 10, Rio's is around 50, and Steinbeck, being a powerful enhancer, started with over 120. After sustained combat and siphoning from the Beast Phantom, he was reduced to about 60. Steinbeck had begun to notice something was wrong. Despite constant fighting, the drain on his aura was unusually fast. And his body, heavy. Sluggish. Gravity felt different. Across from him, Reo looked as composed as ever, seemingly regenerating aura at will. It felt like someone was feeding Reo Nen. He quickly pieced it together, but it was too late. The Beast Phantom's core mechanic was that while siphoning aura, it was immune to damage. This was a rule-based ability, unchangeable even by Reo. Steinbeck couldn't stop it. And the gravity? That was Rio's doing. He had used the aura stolen from Steinbeck to cast Gravity Blessing. He had started at a small multiplier, gradually increasing it so that Steinbeck wouldn't notice. Now, it was at 10 times gravity. And still Steinbeck could fight. Reo couldn't help but admire how insane enhancers really were. You sneaky bastard, Steinbeck spat. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Didn't think you were the type to fight dirty. He glared at Reo, realization settling in, he'd walked right into a trap. The toy he'd thought harmless had spun a web and lured him in. Reo smiled and waved lazily. This is Meteor City, Steinbeck. People here sell out their families to survive. What's wrong with using tactics to stay alive? Even as he spoke, Reo kept a cautious 3-meter distance from Steinbeck, the closest range that still offered safety. Steinbeck, after all, was a monster of muscle and aura. If Reo had fought him directly from the start, he would have been crushed. Thankfully, Steinbeck had entertained the fight too long, and Reo had turned the tides. He also came to realize something important about himself: he hated this kind of battle. He preferred the clash of fists and blades, the satisfaction of direct blows. But this was survival strategy. From now on, Reo resolved to fight with strategy first and power second. If the enemy was of equal or slightly stronger ability, he'd go head-on. But against monsters like Steinbeck, the Beast Phantom was a necessity. Reo also made another resolution: no more relying on borrowed weapons. Twice now he'd lost his blade mid-battle. He would develop a weapon of his own, one tied to his abilities, one no one else could take from him. Still, these were just plans. First, he had to survive this. Bastard! Quit ignoring me. Steinbeck's rage exploded. He didn't care that his aura was still being drained. The blood-red nen around him surged again, blasting the ground beneath his feet as he launched toward Reo. Reo stood still, seemingly lost in thought. Steinbeck's eyes lit up with excitement. But the next moment, Gravity Blessing, X20. Boom. Steinbeck slammed into the earth. Reo felt the drain on his aura and knew it was time. Their battle had caused too much commotion. He couldn't risk lingering any longer. Time to end it. Mother's hate. It was the first time Reo had used this ability. A ghost-faced doll materialized in front of him. It had a head disproportionately large for its body, eyes wide open with tears of blood streaking down its cheeks. A writing area was carved into its stomach. Reo reached out with his left hand made of nen and grabbed the doll. A quill appeared in his right. He scrawled one word, Steinbeck. In that instant, Steinbeck's aura vanished. Reo smirked. The doll had sealed Steinbeck's ability to use nen, for 3 full seconds. Reo raised his right hand. The Phantom Cat Claw, a deadly conjured weapon from the Phantom Troop, appeared. Reo vanished and reappeared behind Steinbeck, yanking out his still-beating heart. The gravity-crippled enhancer coughed up a mouthful of blood, eyes wide with disbelief. He tried to speak, but blood filled his throat, and all Reo could hear was a wet, garbled mess. Reo cancelled gravity blessing. Now that Steinbeck was dying, there was no point in wasting aura. He watched as the man's life faded. The Contractor's note appeared in Rio's hand. But nothing happened. There was no phantom. What? Reo stepped forward. Poof. His eyes widened. A transparent hand reached through his chest. His heart was gone. His knees buckled. The pain didn't even register, only the sound of his own heartbeat. Fading. He activated Gyo. A hideous creature stood before him. It wore Steinbeck's face twisted into a grotesque grin. Its form was broken, warped, some cursed final ability left behind at the moment of death. In its hand, it held a heart. Rio's heart. Snap. The monster crushed it. Blood spilled from Rio's mouth. His vision blurred. His strength slipped away with the blood pooling at his feet. Killed by the same method he had used. A perfect, cruel irony. Is this the end? I don't want to die. I won. I'm not willing. Desperate, Reo surged the last of his aura forward. He couldn't die. Not here. There has to be a way. I'm a conjurer. He tried to think of any resurrection-type nen abilities. Anything. But the weakness washing over him made it impossible to focus. Snap. His body hit the ground with a soft thud. Darkness closed in. And the aura he had gathered dispersed into the air. Chapter 119. The Contractor's note automatically appeared the moment Reo closed his eyes. It flipped on its own to the final page, where Rio's figure materialized, and a message was transmitted to his mind. Capture the house. Trigger, host death. Price, sacrifice a random soul. Ability description, within a certain range, take over the body with the highest compatibility to the host. In the next second, Reo felt himself being yanked out of something, flying through the air for what seemed like an eternity before crashing back down to the ground. Reo didn't know how much time had passed when he suddenly sensed someone rummaging through his body, and he jolted awake. He shot up, his eyes coldly locking on the person who had touched him. In front of him stood a black-haired woman in tattered clothing, her expression one of shocked disbelief. TCH. Thought I could score a meal, but looks like he's still alive. Her words made Reo bristle. It was as if she were cursing him just for existing. A flare of rage surged in his chest, and he instinctively raised his hand to strike. What the hell? The hand in his vision didn't belong to him. It was small, scarred, and calloused, clearly the hand of someone who had experienced serious hardship. Another lunatic. The woman gave Reo a disdainful glance, spat to the side, and turned to leave. Though starving, she wasn't willing to murder for meat. She'd only assumed the boy was already dead and was acting out of desperation. Grrr. Her stomach growled audibly as she walked away, but she kept going. Not far ahead was Garbage Hill. If she was lucky, maybe she could find something valuable to trade for food. Wait. The hoarse voice behind her made her pause for a moment, but she kept walking. I said wait. This time the voice was edged with killing intent, making her instinctively turn around, keeping her guard up. In Meteor City, you never show your back to a stranger. Reo tossed something at her. Take it. She caught it out of reflex and looked down at the item in her hand. Clean bread? She stared at the loaf in disbelief. In all her 3 months in Meteor City, she had never once seen something this fresh, clean, fluffy, and fragrant. She looked up quickly to find the boy, but he was gone. Just a pile of garbage where he had stood. Ashamed of her earlier thoughts, she shook her head, then ducked into the trash heap. She split the loaf in two, hiding half in her clothes and devouring the other half with ravenous bites. Meanwhile, Reo was dealing with the flood of memories hitting him all at once. Shema. A 14-year-old boy. I'm still in Meteor City, now in the 2nd district. And there was some kind of explosion at the exit yesterday. He could feel the nen within his new body. It was immense, even greater than before. But something was wrong. He couldn't control it. It was as though it had been sealed away. Reo remained silent, trying to make sense of it all. He had no memory of what happened after his heart was crushed. The last thing he recalled was the contractor's note, activating on its own. He stretched out his right hand, and the familiar black fog swirled as the contractor's note materialized. Still the same eerie artifact. At first, he was glad to have working limbs again. But his joy didn't last long. He quickly became cautious. Opening the note, he flipped through the pages. He had signed numerous contracts before, one during the Hunter exam, and 9 more since entering Meteor City. Yet now, only 9 contracts remained. The one with the soldier ant was missing. Sacrifice. A word echoed in his mind. He hadn't been thinking it. The thought appeared on its own, as if someone, or something, had responded to his confusion. But the voice vanished just as quickly as it came. Reo didn't know what had happened while he was unconscious. And there was no one around to give him answers. Yo, looks like we found ourselves a fresh chick. Guess we're eating well tonight. The crude voice cut through his thoughts. Reo looked up to see a group of filthy thugs standing atop a garbage mound, their greasy eyes fixed hungrily on him. He recognized the look immediately. These were scavengers. Not just the kind who fed on corpses, but the ones who hunted people. In Meteor City, cannibalism wasn't rare. The conditions were harsh, the food scarce. If someone died, others would eat the body to survive. But some didn't wait for death. Some hunted the living. And from the glint in these men's eyes, it was clear, they had decided Reo would be tonight's fresh meat. Chapter 120. Looking at the cannibals, Reo curled his lip in disdain. If someone had dared to talk to him like that yesterday, he would have charged them with a blade and cut them down on the spot. But Reo turned around and ran. His new body, a scrawny 14-year-old, was completely untrained. In his previous life, Reo only started fighting in underground rings at 16. Before that, he was just a regular kid. The man standing atop the garbage heap stared blankly as his prey turned and bolted without warning. The other 3 thugs didn't react either, their minds still trying to catch up. Smack. 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 The leader slapped all 3 of them across the face. What are you standing around for? Chase him. He leapt off the pile and took off after Reo, the others scrambling to follow. Reo kept sprinting through the grimy alleyways of Meteor City, his breath already ragged. The 4 pursuers were still hot on his heels. The other residents merely glanced over and quickly looked away, no one here would interfere. Reo cursed under his breath. The abilities in his contractor's note were locked for unknown reasons, and the power boosts from previous soul contracts were gone. His current body was already running on empty. The only good news. His void storage still worked. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Reo scowled. This 14-year-old body was useless, barely able to sprint for a minute without breaking down, and those 4 lunatics were still going strong. If he kept running, he'd get caught and turned into someone's dinner. Not an option. Reo spotted a narrow side street about 50 meters ahead. If he could make it there, he'd be out of their line of sight for a moment. That moment was all he needed. He picked up speed. It took nearly 10 seconds to reach the entrance. As soon as he turned the corner, he dove into a pile of junk and debris, covering himself with loose scraps. He adjusted his angle to peek outside, then extended his right hand, ready to summon the phantom troop's cat claw. Preparations complete. Now he just needed his prey. 3 or 4 seconds later, the 4 men rushed into the alley. They barely glanced at the junk pile as they passed. 3 ran ahead, full speed. The 4th trailed behind, clearly exhausted. His sweat-soaked face said it all. Reo let the first 3 pass. His eyes locked onto the straggler, the weakest of the group. He pointed his hand at the guy's chest and waited. The straggler staggered toward the pile, bent over, and gasped for breath. Then he sensed something. When he looked up, 2 cold, determined eyes were staring right at him. HxH. The kid tried to scream, but Reo clamped a hand over his mouth. Half a second later. Thud. The boy's arms dropped limply to the ground. Footsteps echoed. Reo turned. One of the 3 had come back, probably realizing their 4th man was missing. Perfect. Reo dashed into the alley and crouched behind a pillar. A small body meant better hiding. Damn it. You idiot. The man reached the fallen boy and bent down, yelling at the corpse. His back was completely exposed. Reo crept up behind him, hands curled for the kill. Swish. The man sensed something and began to turn, but it was too late. Reo didn't get his heart, but he slashed across his neck, severing an artery. Blood sprayed outward. Fortunately, Reo was behind him and didn't get splashed. Otherwise, he'd have to waste time pulling water from void storage to clean off. The contractor's note was inaccessible, but his void space still worked, and luckily, it had come along with his soul when he reincarnated. A small comfort. Reo wiped the blood from his hand onto the corpse's shirt before walking away. The last 2 enemies still hadn't returned, and he wasn't about to wait for them. His priority now was finding a way to recover his Nen and escape Meteor City. The place reeked of rotting trash and chemical gas, mixing into a poisonous atmosphere that his new body couldn't endure. Nausea clawed at his gut. He needed to get out. Fast. But just as he turned toward the street entrance, he froze. A purple-haired woman stood there, watching him with eyes like frozen steel. I found you. Alternate member of the Phantom Troop. Her voice was like a dagger through the silence. Chapter 121. Reo looked at the purple-haired woman in front of him as she stared at him with cold eyes. A chill ran down his spine. He immediately remembered who this woman was. She had stood silently atop a nearby garbage heap, observing during his earlier fight with the tall, thin man. At the time, Reo had been curious about her identity, but due to the urgent situation, he hadn't thought much of it. Now, hearing her refer to him as an alternate member, Reo's confusion only deepened. And he'd been reborn into a 14-year-old body. How had she recognized him? The woman, seeing the doubt in his eyes, began to speak. I'm Maki, number 10 of the Phantom Troop. I came back to Meteor City for one reason, to find you. Reo blinked. Maki. A member of the troop. That made her words even more confusing. She had returned just to find him? He and Menki had carried out their mission in secret. No one outside their team even knew they were in Meteor City, not even the Hunter Association. So how did Maki know? I came here on a classified mission, Reo said cautiously. Only my 2 teammates knew I was here. How did you know to come looking for me? When Reo had first encountered the Phantom Troop during the Hunter exam, he hadn't had any personal hatred for them. After all, Kurapika's vendetta was not his. But after spending time in Meteor City and witnessing the lawless lifestyle firsthand, he understood the troop's worldview better. In this city, everything was about survival. If you wanted something, you stole it. That was the law. So when a peaceful tribe like the Korta encountered people born from this brutal world, tragedy was inevitable. Still, hearing Maki call him an alternate member left him perplexed. "I just had a feeling," she said coolly, "that an alternate member of the troop would emerge here in Meteor City. I found you on instinct." Reo frowned. Instinct? She had come to this trash-strewn hellhole just on a hunch. And when he fought that thin man, she'd clearly been nearby. Why hadn't she approached him then? As if reading his thoughts, Maki continued. "The first time I saw you, I wasn't sure. Something about you felt off. But the sensation you give me now, there's no mistake. You're the one I came to find." Reo narrowed his eyes. She hadn't been able to tell before, but now that he'd reincarnated, she was certain. Maki remained stoic, but something about her tone shifted. Maybe she found it odd too, seeing a Nen user somehow return to childhood. But given the sheer variety of strange abilities in the world, she wasn't too surprised. "I'm just here to inform you," she continued. "Whether you accept it now or not, you'll end up in the troop. That's what my instincts told me. I'm just speeding things up." Reo nodded thoughtfully. He had once planned to put the Phantom Troop on his hunting list. But to better observe and understand them from within, infiltrating the group made sense. Still, it wasn't going to be that easy. "Maki, right?" Reo said calmly. "I'm guessing you've noticed, my aura nodes haven't been opened yet. I can't use Nen in this body." Maki smirked, her icy mask cracking just a little. "As long as you agree to join the Phantom Troop as a provisional member, I'll open them for you right now." That got Rio's full attention. If he could use Nen again, even in this younger body, he'd be far more dangerous. And if he could eventually encounter Krollo and take his ability for himself. "I accept," Reo said. "Open my aura nodes, and I'll join as an alternate member." The moment he said it, he began calculating. With Nen restored, his safety was secured, at least for now. Then he could plan his next move. As he mused, he gave Maki a sideways glance. "I get the feeling you're thinking something improper," she said flatly. Reo nearly flinched. She could read him too well. "I'm not. I was just wondering. To become a real member, do I need a spider tattoo or something?" Maki narrowed her eyes, then nodded. "Yes. But first, I'll open your aura nodes." She stepped forward and pressed a small, calloused hand against Rio's chest. Her Nen surged through him in a sudden shockwave. "It's done," she said. "You're awakened. Control it carefully. I'm calling the boss now." She pulled a phone from her coat and began to dial. Reo took a step back and focused inward. His aura exploded outward, spiraling around him with far more force than it had in his previous body. Somehow, this new body, despite being younger, had a reservoir of Nen almost on par with Steinbeck's. Rio's aura erupted into the sky like a storm. His rebirth was complete. Chapter 122. Maki, who was on the phone with Krollo nearby, was visibly stunned when she saw the enormous amount of aura erupting from Reo. Her whole body froze, and the phone slipped from her delicate hand. She didn't even notice that she was still on the call. On the other end, Krollo noticed the silence. "Hey, what's wrong, Maki? Did something happen? Maki? Maki?" Maki quickly picked up the phone and replied, "I'm fine. Something unexpected happened, that's all." "By the way, Commander," she added, "you mentioned we have a new mission? Is the brigade finally moving again after all these years?" "Yes," Krollo said calmly. "This mission requires all members. Since you found our alternate, bring him along." Everyone is to gather in York New City by September. I understand, Maki nodded. I'll inform everyone. Meanwhile, Reo was still focused on controlling his aura. The sheer volume made him feel off balance at first, but with his skill and experience, he quickly adjusted. After all, he had always been a genius when it came to Nen. But something felt different. It was as if he could summon something. He remembered the aura he tried to manifest before his death, the one he couldn't finish in time. But now, it was calling back to him. Reo concentrated, and a dense black fog of aura gathered in front of him. A long blade slowly materialized, sleek, deep black, and pulsing with energy. What the hell is this? Reo muttered, recognizing the blade. He grabbed it and threw it to the ground in disbelief. A transformed version of Tessiga? What am I supposed to do with this? The blade hit the ground with a thud, kicking up dust, but continued to vibrate as if in protest. After several seconds, Reo sighed and picked it up again. The truth was, it did have its uses. Natural Teeth Ability 1, Demon Blade. Each point of aura increases the blade's sharpness and penetration by 10%. Ability 2, Slay the Underworld's Envoy. Resurrection allows the wielder to see the Shinigami that appear around the dying. By slaying them with this blade, the wielder can bring the dead back to life. The information appeared in Rio's mind the moment he picked up the blade again. It wasn't exactly what he expected, but it aligned with his original vision, a combat-based Nen ability centered on close-range combat. A resurrection function was simply a powerful bonus. And it was customizable, vows and conditions could enhance it even further. Satisfied for now, Reo turned toward Maki, who had just finished another call. She had been contacting the other Phantom Troop members to inform them of the upcoming gathering in Yorknew. All answered, except one, whose number wouldn't connect. Maki frowned and hung up. Seeing her distressed expression, Reo stayed quiet. But she quickly turned to him anyway. I'll tattoo the spider on you now. Then we'll head to Heaven's Arena. I need to inform the last member in person. Tattoo? Reo blinked. Already? You're just an alternate for now, so your spider won't have a number. But yes, the tattoo is part of the deal. Reo nodded. Alright. Let's get it over with. He took off his shirt and turned around, baring his back. Maki paused briefly, surprised by how unbothered he was, but she didn't comment. A thread of Nen extended from her hand as she began engraving the spider onto his skin. It didn't hurt. Just a faint coldness, followed by a lingering tickle. Reo recognized the chill as her hand resting between his shoulder blades. She was as cold in body as she was in personality. After nearly 10 minutes, she stepped back. It's done, she said. When a number becomes available, I'll give you the official tattoo. Reo shrugged. Works for me. I'm not in this to be a fanboy anyway. Maki nodded approvingly. She disliked neediness in recruits. With the tattoo complete, there was nothing left but to leave Meteor Street and make their way to Heaven's Arena. Without another word, Maki turned and began walking. Reo followed in silence. And that's a wrap, hunters. High voltage sign emoji, open book emoji. Another amazing Hunter x Hunter fanfic added to the books. Massive shout out to the original author, their info's down in the description, so go show 'em some love, blue heart emoji. If you're new here and vibing with the videos, smash that like button, drop a comment, even if it's just screaming Killua supremacy, triumphant face emoji, speech bubble emoji, and hit subscribe to officially join the cult, community. Yay! The Hunter community, eyes emoji. Your support, comments, likes, polls, coffees, everything, keeps this channel alive and motivates me way more than you probably realize, brain emoji. Oh, and don't forget to check the community tab. I actually post polls, memes, and cult lore there. Not just endless sub-begging like some audiobook bots, embarrassed smiley face emoji. That's it for now. Peace. And love y'all. Headphone emoji, red heart emoji.